Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Dorrington. I'm the Deputy Chair of Council Matters. I'll be chairing tonight because our Chair, Lizzie Boyle, is unavailable. Before we start, the councillors in the room have to make a decision on how to run this meeting because of recent changes in legislation. So I have a statement I must read out, and then with a recommendation at the end, which councillors in this room can vote on. And so we want to make our council and committee meetings available to as many people as possible, regardless of where they are, virtually and in person. We also need to make sure that those who attend council meetings here in the council chamber are as safe as possible. We're still getting used to having meetings with people both in person and those zooming in. So please bear with us if this feels a bit crunchy at times. These hybrid meetings will technically be informal, because the government has not brought forward legislation to enable us to continue to operate virtually, but we will run them as if they were formal. They've been advertised, and as you can see, we still have agendas and reports, discussions and votes, and minutes will be taken. Legally, only the councillors present in person will be able to vote, which has been exclusive and unsatisfactory. So to ensure all councillors can vote, we have to delegate to our town clerk to carry out the informal decisions made by councillors tonight. Otherwise, we'll be running the meeting in the usual way, with everyone chipping in as we go along. I hope everyone understands that. So I must make a recommendation that we delegate to our town clerk to implement the decisions that this committee makes informally at this meeting. Can I have someone to propose that, please? Sarah, seconded by Rich. Councillors in the room, vote.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. So that now means that we can operate the meeting. And so the first item after that is apologies for absence, declarations of councillors' interests, and approval of the minutes from the last meeting on the 5th of May 2021. So can I have apologies for absence?
From Lizzie Boyle, Rob Collett and Ali Barclay.
Thank you. Does any councillor have any declaration of interest of any of the items that are going to be raised tonight? Thank you. And can I have someone propose that we approve the minutes from the last meeting on the 5th of May? Nick, seconded by Rich. All vote.
Steve Tanner, are you not voting? Cool. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Actually, my chair, my mistake. Steve isn't a member of this committee. So you're absolutely right, Steve. You kept your hand down. Still unanimous.
But thanks for the effort, Steve. Right, questions and comments from the public and councillors. We'll start with questions from the public. I see we have one attendee who's Bob Ashford. I take it, Bob, you've attended to ask a question or make a comment, in which case, can we make him a participant to ask?
Yeah, you ready?
Evening, Bob. Are you speaking from a long way away?
I am. But the wonders of the internet means it still works, thankfully. Hopefully,
Yeah.
anyway, you can hear me.
Oh, we can hear you, don't worry.
Okay, well, great. Well, thanks for the opportunity. And just to make it clear, I'm sort of speaking here in my own, in my own right as a resident of Somerset Road. And it's about the parking scheme, the proposed parking schemes for Weymouth Road and Somerset Road. And just in case councillors aren't aware, this was something that started 2 years ago when some of the residents in Weymouth Road requested a meeting with traffic officers at the county council, and that was facilitated by Councillor Clark and indeed the town council, I think at the time, 2 years ago. The meeting was held. It was ostensibly, I say, about parking in Weymouth Road, but myself and some other people in Somerset Road basically gate crashed the meeting because we were concerned that any parking proposal in Weymouth Road would obviously have an impact not just on Somerset Road, but all the adjoining roads and park users as well. So we joined the meeting, and there then followed a process of consultation by the County Council on a parking scheme for Weymouth Road and a parking scheme for Somerset Road. So that was what the consultation was based on. At that point, both Somerset Road residents and Weymouth Road residents voted in favour of the scheme. But the scheme, the overall scheme, as I want to stress really, was about a scheme for Weymouth Road and Somerset Road. And it's probably also worth saying at this point that I actually voted against the scheme. And so I'm not coming from a sort of NIMBY attitude of not wanting to see parking on my street. My own kind of basis for that is that the streets belong to the whole community. They don't just belong to residents, you know, they belong to car owners, they belong to people using the park, they belong to the bowls club, they belong to the tennis club. And to give sort of precedence of ownership of a particular street to one particular group, I think is wrong. So I voted against the scheme in its entirety. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I heard it, we or residents were informed at the beginning of June that because of opposition, there was petitions, I think members of the public, park users, tennis club, bowls club, and they basically opposed the whole scheme. And as a result, now the County Council are just going to implement, as they say, the Weymouth Road section of that, meaning that there will be residents parking only on Weymouth Road, apart from paid meters. Now, of course, what that means is that the parking issue, which was an issue in Weymouth Road, is just going to be displaced. It's not going to go away. It will just make parking in Somerset Road and Nunney Road and all the surrounding roads much more difficult than it already is, and it already is difficult. But my concern is about the park and the usage of the park. And, you know, I understand, you know, the need to try to encourage cycling and try to encourage people to walk there. But I live overlooking the park. In the last 25 years, you know, been fortunate enough to do that. And what I will say is, in the last year, the Victoria Park has been an absolute lifesaver for many people. You know, we've never seen so many people use it, young children, older people, families, etc., which has been great. But they all need somewhere to, they don't all need somewhere to park, but a good number of those people can't walk there, can't cycle there. You know, they're older, they have young children, they have disabilities. And they're going to find it extremely difficult now because if, you know, as when the scheme for Weymouth Road is introduced and there isn't going to be a scheme for Somerset Road, then of course parking around there is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be even worse than it already is. And there's going to be a lot of anger about that. And I can fully understand that, really. So I guess my question is, you know, is there anything the town council can do, given that, you know, you are custodians of the park for the people of the community of Frome, and people of Frome will find it, I say, very, very much more difficult to use the park. And particularly, as I say, those people that are older and less able to walk or cycle there. And I'm also concerned because, you know, we had an original consultation on a scheme, and I say, despite the letter that came through from the County Council at the beginning of June, saying that you know, we have been consulted. We haven't been. No one's been consulted on the scheme that's being implemented because it's only half of it, and there doesn't seem to be any form of redress, any form of review, any form of appeal. It's just being implemented, and I believe it's going to be implemented very quickly. It talks about a review, you know, but it's taken 2 years to get to this point. So I don't hold out any optimism about a review taking place in the future. So that's my concern, really. I think, you know, the park is going to be very difficult to access, as I say, for a lot of people, and at a time when it's really needed. I'll shut up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Is there anybody else? I can see some hands raised. John Nelson, you're the ward councillor. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, well, I would like to echo everything Bob just said, basically. And that's what I had said when we were consulted on the scheme. And it seems rather curious that they've only implemented the bit on the road. So I was opposed to the scheme because of all the reasons Bob just cited, because there's so many users who actually need that parking. And I'm lucky to live on Weymouth Road overlooking the park as well. And I think it should be open to everyone. And the argument that came again and again was that if you just do one thing to one road, then it pushes things elsewhere. And I don't know what, as far as I understand, I'm not sure that if there is anything we can do, except for the fact that in the initial consultations, it was widely acknowledged that doing things just to one road would simply push it elsewhere. And it didn't fit in with the transport, thinking broadly. So when they did the consultation, we thought, because they did all the roads around here, we thought there'd at least be some consideration of that. But in the end, all the residents and all the other roads sort of rejected that. They didn't really want it for whatever reason. And so all we were left with in the end is this scheme on this road. So I support his comments, but I'm not sure there's anything we can do.
Thank you, John. Maxine, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I absolutely support what Rob's saying. A few of the people in the room know that I've got mild agoraphobia. Doesn't usually stop me doing anything much at all, but that having that happen in Weymouth Road, it will actually make it very hard for someone like me who isn't otherwise in any way disabled, but you know, you've still got a reason why you wouldn't be able to get to the park, and it would make it very, very difficult. So I do fully support what you've said. Not just for my own reasons, but for anyone else who has any other reasons in the town that would make it difficult to access the park if they can't. So I wonder, and I'd like to put this to Paul Wynne. I know that this has now happened, it's gone through consultation, but I would be quite happy if we were to write to, I believe it's maybe Steve Deacon, and say why that we're unhappy about this and why we're unhappy about this, even though I know it's happened. I don't know if we can turn it round. I don't want to make promises or raise expectations, but I think we should say something.
Thanks, Maxine. Does anybody else present wish to have a comment before I ask Paul to comment? Thank you. Paul, what can we do?
Yeah, I mean, we are in a quandary here, as John says. We have, as staff, tried to get in touch with the County Council since the petition. We kind of expected it to sort of go into the ground for a little while for the county to review what it was planning to do and then come back to us and discuss some options. That, as Bob rightly said, that hasn't happened, and there are now parking meters, I think with a hood on still, John, but on Weymouth Road. I'm very happy to write to the County Chief Executive and ask him to review this decision in the light of all the points that have been made by Bob and Maxine and John. So if you'd like me to do that, I can do that and see if we can get some action. But at the moment, I think the ward councillor county-wise, John Clark, has also been trying to get in touch with the county unsuccessfully. So I think the right thing to do would be to write to the Chief Executive and just ask for a response from him.
So looking at councillors present, is that how we would like to proceed with this?
Yep.
Certainly how I would like to deal with it.
Okay, I'll draft a letter and
Bob, is that acceptable in the near future, just as a short-term thing?
No, that's really helpful, guys. I think the point I was trying to, I think the overall point here is it is about consultation. You know, as I say, what we were consulted on is not what's being implemented. And I think therefore the consultation's flawed, and they have a duty to actually carry out a consultation on the scheme that's being implemented. So I think that's that would be a valid point to make. But thank you very much, No, for listening. And I do appreciate it's difficult, but I say my main interest is about seeing people use the park, because it's wonderful.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate your input. Enjoy the rest of your trip. And we'll
Thank
see you
you.
when you get back.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the public that we can see? Nothing online. Thank you. I don't see any members of any other councils present. So is anything amongst our own councillors we wish to bring up? Is he?
oh, it's here.
Oh, just turned up. Just missed it.
While we try and patch John through, which is what it's like.
Yeah, it's just thank you really for all the staff and councillors who helped with the bike journal. Sundays, this is with my Brooms Missing Links hat on. You know, it was a really good amount raised, but particularly for the effort and the time, storing lots of bikes here at the town hall, and various officers who got involved. Thank you to all of them for doing that. It's really, really appreciated.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, it was good to see it. And almost £4,000, wasn't it?
Yes, over 3,000 in the end.
Yeah.
And also, I should say thanks to Pronto Bikes for having the raffle as well. So that's really good.
Very good. Do we have John Clark online now? No, he's gone.
Actually, I'm online. And
Oh, where are you?
I
You're a
don't know.
panelist now. Is there anything you, and it's that section of the meeting, John, where you normally have to say something. So is there anything you want to say?
Oh no, but I came in on the tail end of Bob Ashford and the concerns that he's raised about Weymouth Road. There has been, as I understand it, my understanding is there was full consultation on this matter with residents of Weymouth Road, Somerset Road and other surrounding roads about the options that were available to the local residents. And I should say this has taken nearly 3 years to get any action. And the residents we had a number of meetings of which I think Bob Ashford was at one, and John Councillor Nelson was also present, at which all these matters were discussed. All the residents in the locality were asked their views about the options, and the majority of people in Weymouth Road said that they wanted to see parking permits, residents' parking permits. That's the first thing. So that's a decision that was made by the residents. And you know, if you believe in participation, it wasn't about all of Frome having a voice in this. It was about the local residents having a voice and their voice being heard in terms of safety for them and for road users, and to improve the area in terms of car parking, etc., etc. And I appreciate fully all the concerns about the ripple effect, and we discussed this, and that was why the other roads were also asked their views. And some of these discussions have been about how we can try to reduce car parking in the area and encourage people to not park their cars in town, but to walk and use local transport wherever possible. And I know there will be some who won't be able to do that. As far as the parking meters are concerned, I should be totally honest, I challenged that. That was not a decision I had any involvement with. I was told that County and Steve Deakin, as their represented, as part of the scheme, were implementing parking meters, not only on Weymouth Road, but also Somerset Road. So I challenged that because the area on Somerset Road they were proposing was adjacent to the park, which I didn't think was safe to encourage people to park somewhere where there was no pavement. So they dropped that element. But they said that their position is that use of parking meters will encourage people to seek alternative ways of using the park rather than coming in their cars. And I appreciate what's been said. I think Maxine raised the issue about some people have to use their cars to get there. I will double check whether there's disabled parking bays. I would check that out because I think that will provide a facility for those individuals who can't walk to the park or because of some disability need that space. So I will check that out with Steve Deakin. By all means, yes, I mean, register your opposition to it. But my feeling is there has been full consultation. It may not be to everyone's agreement, but that's about consultation and engagement with the local residents. And the residents of Weymouth Road, as I say, overwhelmingly wanted to see parking restrictions in place for the safety of their, for themselves and others who use the road and also use the park. Because one of the things that's been improved is access to the park around this. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for your time.
John, as you said, you came in at the end of Bob's speech. What he is saying is that they voted for a parking scheme, but it's only being implemented in Somerset Road. So the people in Weymouth Road who voted for it thought they were going to get a res park scheme in their own street as well. But now they're going to get the worst of both worlds, in his opinion. They're going to get restricted parking in Weymouth Road, but the overspill will be parking in Somerset Road. That's not a scheme he feels he was consulted on. So that was the basis of his complaint.
Okay, I don't think that's valid. So I've tried to address that. The residents of Weymouth Road. Oh, are you still there?
Yeah, we're all here.
Oh, okay, I've got something else come up. The residents of Weymouth Road voted by majority to have parking permits in place. And Somerset
Okay.
Road residents did not vote in favour of that, and therefore it was dropped.
Maxine, you have your hand still up. Is it?
Yeah, it's just, no, it is a really quick comeback to John. Hi, John.
Hiya.
I understand that what you're saying about it's about local residents, but I think when you're looking at a really major community asset as Victoria Park, you've got to look Frome wide and beyond Frome as well, because there are people that come in from neighbouring villages and use Frome and use Victoria Park as a hub for them. So, you know, it's very easy to say people can cycle or people can do whatever, but some people do need to park, and it's not always that easy. And I'm sure you know this as a county councillor, I certainly know it, to get a disability badge. And certainly for something like mild agoraphobia, you can't. And there are lots of things that you can't get one for. So I don't know. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I really do think an asset like that should be looked at on a Frome-wide basis. So I'm really not happy with the result of this.
Yeah, no, I could come back. I think as a town council, you have every right to challenge the decision to book in parking, because that was not what was consulted on as such. It was something that was added on by the Steve Dakin on behalf of the parking, whatever. So by all means, yep, I agree. That was a concern I raised, that it would limit access to the park, and it is a great amenity that we have. And I don't want to see the access limited. I just wanted to see some safety for people who lived in Weymouth Road, and that's what they chose to. But I get your point. Thanks.
Okay, unless we have anything further on this, we should move on. Any other questions from anybody? Fine. Therefore, we will move on to the next agenda item, which is an update on the online work of the marketing and the communications team. And I think Becky is delivering this.
I am indeed. Evening
Thank you,
all.
Becky.
We are just going to give you a brief overview of the digital comms that has happened by the whole team since last Council Matters. What I'm going to do is start with our Frome Town Council website. What we do generally each month is look at what has worked, what hasn't worked, and look at all our analytics and stats to make sure that we are performing well, and we are, I think that's, there we go. So you can see from this that since the launch of the new website back in February, our new website continues to perform well, which is great news. Most notably, you'll be able to see there on the dates in the middle of that screenshot, the page views and the page sessions have increased since the introduction of FIND, which is our Family Information Network Directory, if those of you who don't know yet. Our focus now for our website is to move to provide the best user experience we possibly can for that information service. What we've seen when looking at our analytics over the past 6 to 8 weeks is that FIND has been in the top most viewed pages since its launch in May, which is great news. So aside from the homepage, which is something we would automatically assume would be one of our top ranking pages, and actually the new mayor announcement back in May, the FIND page has been the most visited in the past 6 weeks, proving that the directory, the need for the directory and the reach of the directory, which is really great news for us. So what we're looking to do, we're going to be doing some further promotion on this directory, including taking it out and about to all our events, refine that. If you go to the next screen, Laura, I've just taken a brief snapshot of what the pages, most viewed pages within the FIND directory at the moment. So we will keep an eye on that and monitor that, and we can look and refine anything that we can see. It will also be able to give us information on trends and what's looked at, and also feed into Kate's baselining study for moving forward. We've also seen lots of other successful content over the past few weeks since the last Council Matters. Again, last May, we saw the new mayor. There he is, cheeky chappy Andy, sitting there. His page, his new mayor's page, gained nearly 300 visitors in his first week alone. And which is great news and great engagement. So we're really pleased about that. Also, we've done a lot of event promotion. It's all in full swing at the moment. So a lot of the press activity linking back to our website for our events such as Picnic in the Meadow and the recent Bike Jumble have also performed really well, which is really nice to hear and see. Laura, can you go to the next slide? This is just some look at the stats on our sister Discover Froome website. This has also been performing well. You can see from that bottom line there, which is all green, we've got, since things have opened up, we've been seeing a steady increase in traffic to the site, which is really good. Most visited pages at the moment are things for like markets and shopping and food and drink. And town walks and events. So it really is a great hub for us to use, and we're feeding information in there all the time. And it's great to know that Discover Froome is still coming out top in Google searches for all things Froome, which is exactly where we want it to be. Regarding some of our other digital comms, we're looking at our social channels. Last meeting, we discussed and outlined our plans to give our social channels maybe a bit more of a lighter, more appealing touch. And this has been reflected in the content that's been published since that last meeting, and the audiences seem to be responding really well to that. And we have had positive increased engagement, which is really good. Following on from the increase in the website visits from the mayor, we've also seen similar activity on our social channels, and from whether it's a new video from a local student to sharing Andy's mayor's column. He has definitely started his mayoral year with social gusto, which we're really pleased about too. Other things which have performed really well, which we are pleased about, are we've seen lots of viewers and responses to the videos that of the People's Budget that we placed on our social platforms, and that in turn led to lots of feedback and support, which is put forward through to our Your Priorities platform, which is really great to see the support for all of those projects. We've also seen that the profile of the town has increased with the recent filming of the community fridge for Escape to the Country, and obviously, as always, on our social channels, whenever we put something, one of our lovely pictures of anything that the Rangers do, because they do such a great job and everyone really appreciates them. It always goes down really well, and everyone really appreciates all the work that they do around our town in our green and open spaces. We've also, as you can see on the bottom of that slide, reinstated our Discover Froome Instagram and Facebook social accounts. We did that on the 28th of May, and so far we've seen an increase of about 10% in new followers, which is great for just the first month because we've not been running it for very long. The post that has received the most response so far is Andy Rintmore again in front of the town hall, but that's still great. And then also we've done some lovely work around supporting the Froome Festival, and that's always been well received as well. But I think for these channels, we're trying to get a balance of the promotional posts for local businesses and also kind of inviting images for Froome, which can, they generally work exactly, the responses are really good and they're on par with each other. But we hope to be able to, if using our Discover Froome channels, be able to support our visitor offer, and therefore we provide more bandwidth for our community offer on our other social channels, which is really good. And finally, we've also been obviously doing some other digital comms through our newsletters, which we send out. And we've been working hard to increase the reach and also their click-through rates. So whether that's the Town Clerk's update or the Business Bulletin, Community Group's newsletter, or any of the other recent updates that the officers do to their individual projects and their individual teams, the open rate and our click-through rate is performing well above average, which we're really pleased about. And the community newsletter, recent one that went out, we received some really nice feedback from one resident, and he told us that it was quite a brilliant newsletter to send around to all the groups, and they gave their heartfelt thanks, which is always very nice to hear from the comms team, and it's a nice note to end on. So that's it for today.
Thank you, Becky. Does anybody have a question or comment for Becky? Can we go back to the full screen, please, so I can see who's there? There we are. Has anybody got their hand up? No. Oh, hang on. Sarah, you're directly in front of me.
Just to say, brilliant, well done, fantastic work, reiterating everything that we say about the Rangers and marvellous profile that they give the council, because, you know, it's always, there's always nice things to say, and the town is really spectacular, so they are doing an amazing job, and all the other things you're doing, it really feels like there's a real buzz about a lot of stuff that's going on at the moment, and the media obviously put a huge balance to doing that, profile raising and talking about the best bits of the room, and it's really great to see.
Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, similar really. I think it's important that we remember how much we spend on comms and communications, and there are lots of reasons why we do that, and one of them is for this sort of stuff. You know, it just gets the message out there. So a lot of what we do as a parish town council is signpost people. So that signposting is brilliant. We make a resilient community because of that. So it's a reminder that spending people's preset money on communications is actually a very valuable thing to do in this day and age. So thanks to the team.
Thanks, Rich. Any more? Any more? Thank you, Becky. Our next agenda item is to discuss how to evaluate Frome Town Council's work. Who is presenting this one?
I'm going to introduce this one, Mark, actually.
Hi, Peter. Yep. Carry on.
Thank you very much indeed, and good evening, everyone. As you know, we're now committed as an organisation to undertake more evaluation of our work, and following discussion with Lizzie, we agreed it would be useful to have an introductory discussion with councillors about this at this meeting. And the purpose of that really is to help inform our work on some detailed proposals, which will come to the next meeting. And we'll come back to that when we reach the recommendation stage of this item. Before we get into the discussion proper, which will be introduced by Veronica, who is our climate action researcher and evaluator, I'm going to briefly share our thoughts on evaluation and a reminder of why it's important. And as I'm sure you're familiar with, evaluation is a process that helps us to critically examine a project or programme and understand how effective it may be in helping us to meet our goals. We think it's important to do because it can help us to demonstrate the impact of our activities to a wide variety of audiences. It can help us to identify who is benefiting from our work and secure support and funding from others, and identify where we need to improve our performance. It's also worth reflecting for a moment on the difference between outputs, outcomes, and impact, the reason for which will become clear when we start the debate. Outputs are the activities delivered and are relatively easy to measure. Outcomes are the observed effects of the outputs on beneficiaries, which are more difficult to measure. And impact is the degree to which the outcomes we observe are attributable to the activities that we pursue, something which tends to be difficult to measure, but nonetheless really useful. Laura, I wonder if you could just pop up the slide relating to the revised strategy, please. So the next slide, please. And we thought we'd give you a brief reminder of what our revised strategy says about evaluation, which obviously reflects a number of the points I've just mentioned. Next slide, please. And I'll now hand over to Veronica, who will introduce the discussion.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. So 3 points for discussion and just 5 minutes to talk about each of them. So think about what Peter said in terms of just introducing this first point. What are the outcomes of interest for Frome Town Council? So thinking about the vision and philosophies laid out in the strategy, the revised strategy, what outcomes are interesting to measure, and points to consider within that, including things like, do they need to be kind of broadly applicable across the evaluation, different evaluations conducted by the council? Do they need to consider certain beneficiaries? What kind of things are you interested in measuring change against in the short and medium term, and then thinking about the longer term in terms of impact as well. So I guess that's probably enough on that to open that to discussion.
Yeah.
I think, shall I kick off with something?
Please do. It's going to be a bit tricky with this joint meeting we've got.
I think the outcomes of interest, considering we're looking increasingly at ecological emergency, I think there's something there that we want to show, particularly on our estate, an enhancement of biodiversity. So we need to be able to measure that, I guess.
Yeah, John's had his hand up for a bit. Yeah, I can see you got your hand up. And I see Anne's got her hand up, but I saw John a while ago. John, do you want to say something?
Yeah, no, for me, it's just addressing the second point of that. Rather than just choosing a small area to evaluate, when we initially talked, I was thinking about just setting in place a sort of system of auto evaluation so that we regularly look at how we're spending cash and the impacts of that, rather than just choosing something that we want to evaluate and in whatever way. I think it's really important because for me, it's all about the value for money. We've raised our precept quite substantially for every year for the past few years. And, it's important that we're able to demonstrate that we're giving value for money. So that's one outcome, I would say, that we want to make sure that we have good value for money. So, and that's not just one area of activity, which is easy or difficult to evaluate. It's across our estate, across all our expenditures, really, to look at how to increase the effectiveness, increase the what residents are getting for their precepts. So that's that. Rather than so my plea is that we don't just get wrapped up on just looking at one small aspect, that we think about it across our piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Then Sarah.
I'd like to make a plea. It's quite strange, I expect, for a former financial planner, but I like to make a plea for it not to be all about finance, about happiness. And I know that's really difficult to measure, but I think if we can build a town where not only no one gets left behind, but happiness is improved and increased amongst our community. Other countries, Denmark, for example, do major longitudinal studies to look at how happiness is improved over time. So looking at the same people over time and seeing how their happiness changes. So that's what I'd make a plea for.
Thank you. Sarah?
I'd echo both of those. I think it very much needs to be about the process rather than subject at this stage. We need to think about how we evaluate things, but it's a process we need to design rather than the content at this stage. I think Anne is absolutely right. We need to look at things other value for money, we need to look at satisfaction levels, access to services, all the things that we want people to feel about feeling good about living in this town. We're obviously going to need a huge swathe of baseline measures to then measure things from. So that's a whole other discussion in itself. And I'll make a plea for a large amount of research to be quantitative, because to measure these kinds of nuances is really not going to be about numbers as much as it's going to be about experience.
Thank you. Any more? Back to Veronica, I guess.
Rich.
Oh, hello, Rich.
And Anita.
And Anita.
I think the format that the outcomes also. I think that the format that we use for the outcome, is going to be really important. So I'm thinking we have a series of reports that we could take the data, qualitative data, whatever it is, put it in some kind of series of reports, which could then help us to fund future projects. If we're going forward looking for grants or if we're looking for initiatives, we'd have this bank of data to say, well, yeah, this worked really well last time, but people didn't like this. So we could perhaps tweak it that way. So I see that as a really important facet of this, really, that if we can store the data in some usable format, it's easily accessible, not just for us, but also known to the public.
Thank you. Anita?
Thanks, Mark. Only really because I couldn't hear anything that Sarah said. I don't know if it's possible just to encapsulate very quickly the meat of the content of her response, but it's very difficult to hear you, Sarah. I don't know if I'm the only one struggling with that.
I'm sorry.
That mic wasn't on. That mic came out and switched off.
Is that better, Anita?
That's much better. Thank you.
That better?
Yep, lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so very quickly, I was saying that this really needs to be about a process that we can apply to any given subject, not really about the area that we're looking at. If we come up with an evaluation process, it needs to be a method that we can look at any subject with. We'll also need to establish a broad series of baselines, and that I agree with Anne that it shouldn't just be about value for money. We will need a lot of qualitative work into the nuances around people's, the changes in levels of satisfaction in a broad range of areas around living in Frome. That was basically.
Thank you. That's lovely. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, Veronica.
Okay, sure. So to introduce the second point, which might have come slightly into what Sarah was talking about, would it be valuable to trial 2 or 3 projects or activities and look at doing an evaluation there to see how it would work and how it would be resourced and all that kind of thing? Or is it better, or is it maybe not an either or, to have an evaluation strategy to look at embedding within all the council's activities?
Go on, Sarah.
In my experience, that model works really well of using a couple of projects to work out how you can evaluate it, what are the kind of questions that you can ask, and I think it really would help to have some trial projects that we can work through those, because you need to tweak things. You can't just design a framework without thinking about how that's going to work. There's something called real world evaluations, which very much are adaptable to the kind of scenarios that we're going to be talking about, because they could be really extremely varied. So I think a couple of test cases would be really helpful.
Sorry, who else wanted to speak? Sheila.
Hi. I was just querying how, I mean, it's interesting, Anne's comment about a sort of broad happiness quota or happiness sort of evaluation, because then it seems to me you're looking at communities rather than projects, and so we have a quite a broad network of neighbourhood groups there. So whether working with something like that to get a cross section of our community, or getting a cross section of our community has always been the most difficult thing to evaluate in any project. So I'd be interested in at least piloting how we can actually work on that.
Yeah. Maxine, then Nick.
Thank you very much. And hi, Veronica, I haven't met you, but thank you very much for the beginning of that presentation. That was brilliant. What I wondered, I'm sure you're probably going to move on to this, or maybe you are. As we said earlier, quite a lot of what we do is about signposting, and it's also about linking people up together. So, for example, the vocational training group that I chair and that Peter and Viv run, a lot of what we do is linking people up with each other and making the whole network stronger. I know this is what, in another way, probably everybody else has said, but how do we evaluate something like our signposting or our how we link other people with each other and create that? I guess that is what people have been saying, but are you moving on to that, Veronica?
Not exactly. There's the third discussion point, which might start to speak to that, but not really specifically.
Okay, Nick.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I think there's a kind of join up that I kind of lean towards from John's point and Sheila's point, and I think some of the really thing that crosses over my concern around the happiness thing. It's a bit like the kindness agenda. It's quite nebulous. It's quite hard to sort of pin it down and then assess how deep we go into that. But what we need to be mindful of, I think, is how much money and resources, opportunity costs of our town council staff spend on the various projects. And I think the community engagement work that's been carried out is one area where we are actually properly engaging with local people. So there's already that process of engagement, that understanding of what's happening in the community. I think that's a really powerful, really rich area to explore and to look at, what is the cost of that in terms of what are we spending, in terms of, money going into it and officer time going into it. And then we'll have a genuine opportunity to look at the outputs and outcomes and impact amongst the community engagement groups and networks. So I'll look at those, but that's quite a fruitful area for us to explore.
Sheila, you coming back?
Yeah, just when Nick was speaking, I was just thinking one of the things that we are aware of is that the neighbourhood groups and that sort of community resilience work is a very slow burn. It takes a long time. So, Veronica, I'd be interested to know how to sort of, there's things that you can pace quite quickly and things that actually would need a longer lead in to be able to effectively evaluate how things are working. So that, that sort of subtle difference in the sort of evaluation is going to be necessary. I'm sure it's possible to do, but that would be something I want to have explained a bit more.
John, you're coming back?
Yes, please. I guess I go back to the point I was making. When we talk about value for money, it's not just looking at the finance. It's actually looking at all those other impacts as well, what we're getting for that. So we can look at happiness, we can look at biodiversity, we can look at lots of things. But at the end of the day, it's about the effectiveness of the council, how it operates. So I think because for some of these things, I accept they're long gestation processes, they take a long time, but you can still look at, you still need to come at some sort of hard parameter that you use to sort of compare, do we do this or we do that? Do we do more of this or do more of that? Or less of this? And I think that's why the financial criteria, I think, is an important part of that, because actually that's, we're here put in place by residents to gather money and spend it. And I think that's the first thing people will ask you about when how much is all that costing us? And is it a good use of money? And that's the common question. So I think a hard parameter like finance, or value for money or something like that, along with all these other things that we're setting out to achieve, is really important.
Thank you. No other hands up at the moment, so back to Veronica.
Thanks. I don't know if it's worth saying just like a couple of points to those bits. Yeah. Okay. I suppose something to come back to, I think Maxine, did you say something about kind of how a lot of we do is signposting and strengthening networks, and just thinking about how, and with all of this in terms of things other people have said as well, in looking at an evaluation, whether it's for specific projects or kind of on a town-wide level, there would be a certain amount of output data collection. So looking at the numbers of things like website statistics, like Becky was showing us, show us some really good data on things that people are using for signposting. And then also getting some qualitative information as well. So if you're asking people what they found helpful and why and when, that might just start to give us a kind of, more pieces of the picture and to nail back into some of those points. And then, yeah, it's definitely worth thinking going forwards. I mean, maybe this brings us into point 3 about whether it is worth how to think about integrating more of a case-by-case evaluation for specific projects, and also thinking about the town as a whole and how the resilience work or parks and green spaces or all the other work that's happening is affecting everyone on a daily basis, and whether we set up something longitudinal like Sarah was mentioning in Denmark, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's just like a lot to think about. But I'll bring into question 3, which is thinking about evaluation generally, and also particularly if we were going to trial 2 or 3 activities, what would be a priority to evaluate and why. And there are plenty of points to consider in those kind of decisions.
Okay, anyone want to say anything on that? Rich?
Okay, is this all right? You can hear me? I forgot what I was going to say now. No, I haven't. I think maybe you could start with the work programme as it currently exists and produce some kind of list for people to look at. And you could do a town-wide survey and see if what are people's perceptions of these different aspects of our work. And then we might already have that information somewhere, but that might just highlight in an objective sort of way things that we ought to be highlighting, concentrating on, rather than us suggesting, well, I think it would be a good idea if you look at parks and gardens, would it be better first to go to the public and say, these are all the things that Flint Town Council do, can you rate them, can you rank them? And then we'd have a set of data from which we could pull 5, 10 different things that we want to analyse. And we might face some harsh truths, things that people don't like what we're doing and so on. But I think that would be a useful starting point. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Yes, but the concerns I would have is that whenever we do any kind of research or evaluation or consultation, we get extremely low response rates and we make a decision on 14% of something versus 15% of something. So I'd be very, very wary about the store that we put unless we were getting really good numbers.
Any more? Okay. So have we discussed the 3 questions, Veronica?
I think so. Maybe. Yeah, I think so.
So in that case, I guess it's back to Peter. We have a recommendation that we're going to create some sort of group to discuss all this under Peter's direction. Peter, do you want to say something? And then obviously there's interest and expertise in the room, which we can draw on.
Yes.
Peter, do you want to say something about that?
Yes. I've already had a conversation with 1 or 2 councillors who would like to be involved with this, but there may be 1 or 2 others. I think we could fairly quickly bring together a small group that can assist with this work. And what we plan to do is to come back very quickly to you with some specific proposals that we can run with. So the plan will be to come back to your next meeting with a report, and then hopefully we can get on the road. One of the things that we will need to think about is our capacity to do a lot more in the way of research and evaluation. These things are resource intensive when they're done. Veronica, for example, is currently wholly engaged in the research and evaluation associated with the Green and Healthy Future programme. She was actually appointed to assist with the delivery of that. So I think that's something that we need to think about very carefully. But that, of course, is something that we will address in that report that we bring to you next time. So that really is the next stage as I see it, and hopefully that's something that councillors are willing to support. And obviously what we'll do is we'll take account of everything that we've heard tonight. It's been some really useful suggestions in terms of how we move forward with this. I think we can fairly quickly come forward with some proposals, and we'll do that next time.
Thank you, Peter. Then.
So, the recommendation talks about a small group. I wonder if you wanted to identify that small group this evening. Peter, have you thought about that?
Well, I think I have spoken already with Lizzie and John, who are very keen to be involved. I do wonder whether Sarah would like to join us. I know, Sarah, you have a lot of expertise and experience in this area. Obviously, we'll try and involve 1 or 2 other staff members as well. I mean, hopefully that group would give us enough expertise an insight into this area of work for us to come back with some proposals. So that would be my suggestion.
Thank you. So we've identified some members already, and I guess a follow-up email to those who aren't here tonight would be in order, both staff and councillors. So that would be a good idea. So Laura, can we have the recommendation on the screen if you have it, please? Or do you want me to read it out? Here we go. So the recommendation is that we delegate authority to the Deputy Town Clerk in consultation with a small group of councillors with expertise in evaluation to prepare some costed evaluation proposals based on the outcome of discussion at this meeting and to be considered at the next meeting of this committee. So does anyone want to propose that? Richard's going to propose that. Sheila's going to second it. We're going to vote on it in the room. It's unanimous. Well, pause to say it's unanimous.
Count on the screen. Keep your hands up if you've only got your hands up, with the yellow hand. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Okay, so standby computers, expect an invitation from Peter. Thank you, Peter. Our next agenda item is
Sorry, Anne has a hand raised.
oh, sorry.
No, she doesn't.
Okay, let's go to the next agenda item, which is to decide whether to approve the use of glyphosate, I'm never going to say that, weed killer, to control Japanese knotweed on our land. Apparently we have an outbreak of this terribly invasive weed, which is dangerous to everybody and can make us legally liable. I was speaking to Chris about this afternoon when I met him, but I was hoping he's going to be here to present it, but I think it's down to Paul to present this item now.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Chris sends his apologies. As Mark says, we've got 2 outbreaks of this on the riverbank of Welshville Woods and just off Henley Way. We've got a legal duty to manage and control that. The usual way is to eradicate it completely because it multiplies really, really quickly and it's very, very invasive. So we've discussed various options with management companies, companies who specialize in the management of knotweed, and also with the Environment Agency. And importantly, I think the Environment Agency have confirmed to Chris and myself that what we're proposing here is the best way forward. There does seem to be very little that could effectively be done to control Japanese knotweed without the use of a glyphosate. Now, as Mark said, we don't like doing this, and a few years back, the council decided as a precautionary measure to ban the use of glyphosate on our land. So what Chris is proposing here is that this is exceptional circumstances and not something that we want to do, but we don't appear to have any option. So the glyphosate option is the one being recommended, but as an exception rather than going back to using it like we did 10 years ago. So that's where we are with it. We're in a really uncomfortable position, really. We don't want to use the glyphosate, but we can't see that we have any alternative to use it. And we have to do some work on the Japanese knotweed as we have a legal obligation to do so. So Laura, oh no, sorry, Mark, have a chat. Any thoughts about that?
Right, does anybody want to make a comment on this knotty issue? That'll be Sheila to start with, and then Sarah.
That this work will be done not by our agents, but by
a specialist company.
Professionally.
Absolutely, will be.
Yeah, okay. Because obviously it'll be quite visible in the centre of town, and we need to be really clear that this is actually being done in a protected way.
Yeah, yeah. So there'll be important to put the right in advance, and particularly the right comms message going out. Yeah.
Sarah?
I was absolutely going to say that. Yeah, it's going to look really bad. And is there any other? Why can't we dig it out? I'm not aware that it's that big, the size of the plant that's going there at the moment. So why? I'm sure there is a reason. But why can't we get it out by hand?
as I understand it, and Mark may know more than me because he was talking to Chris about it this afternoon, but as I understand it, digging it out in very small areas is effective, but because it goes, is it the rhizomes go under the ground rapidly, it would, if you start to do it like that, it's basically an annual task that we have to do every year because you're never going to get all of it. I think that is the reason why Chris is.
Why is that a problem though?
Just because it's more work to do.
I think there's also an issue of where it is on the banks of the river is also a bit of a difficult site to work on as well for involved like that.
Well, you're all going to know my thoughts on that, really.
Yeah, no, that's fine, and you're allowed to have your thoughts on that, and that's why in 2016 Frome Town Council passed and so that's why
It's just a real shame.
it is a real shame. Who was it next? I think it was John, then Rich, then Anita, then Nick.
Yeah, I
Think
just
about
think,
that.
so I think it's just important to remember that the town council may be not using glyphosate, but it's being used all over town already. So it's not like it's being something that's going to be introduced that's alien to Frome. People are using it in gardens all around. It's a common thing to be used. And it's just because we're not using it doesn't mean it's not happening everywhere anyway. So I would support the council using glyphosate for this instance. It's nice that we are being very considerate about its use, but I don't think there's any other option to get rid of this. Other than just consuming vast amounts of council resources with people on their hands and knees trying to pull it up every year. And that won't work with Japanese knotweed.
Okay, who did I say next? Was it Rich?
Yeah, thanks. I've got quite a bit of experience of this. It's there's a patch of land in Frome which gets done every so often. I've just dealing with the retreat area. They've got a massive patch. So the developers are going to have to pay, they're going to dig it up, but that's not anywhere near the river. It's near the embankment, but it's going to cost them thousands of pounds every year over the next 5 years to do that. So I think in this case, and this is a patch that's been there for on and off for quite a number of years actually that we're talking about, at least one of them is. I think in this case, it's perfectly acceptable to put some poison in a very localized place. It's not like we're spraying it everywhere. It will be injected. It'll be done by experts. And to dig the riverbank up would be, there'll be rhizomes right the way along that bank. So what it does is it knocks it out, kills it. It will come back. It's very hard to kill completely. But you might not have to do anything next year. It might be the year after that it comes back, to kind of answer Andy Jones' got a question there. So I think it's justified in this case. If we don't do anything with it, you can't chop it down, because if you do that, it spreads. If you walk over it, it spreads. One leaf can actually propagate. So it's really lethal stuff in that terms. It's difficult to get rid of that. But, I think sadly it is the only thing that we can do in this case.
Okay, Maxine. Yeah, go on, Maxine. Sorry, Anita. Yeah, didn't see your name there.
I'm just really thinking about the public here. I wasn't sure how this is administered. I understand from Rich it's injected or what have you. But is there a need for us to put up any signs to warn the public that this is going on, and will that happen? Can we make sure that there is some safety involved for the public?
One assumes that the contractors will put up appropriate signs that this being operated in the area, but that's something we could that Chris would definitely check up on.
They do that at Longleat. That's what they do at Longleat. They just have a small sign up saying
Yeah.
controlling.
Yeah, and that's what I guess that's what we'd have to do.
Just struggling to hear again.
Yeah. Who was it next? Was it Andy or Nick?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I mean, I share people's discomfort with this. It's not ideal, but I mean, can't say I'm an expert, but I've had a friend who's worked with Japanese knotweed for a long time, and I do appreciate the difficulties of trying to get rid of it. And I think even when you cut it out, you still need to inject the weed killer or phosphate or whatever it is into it anyway, because of the spread of it under the soil. So I don't see any way around it, even if they do cut some of it out.
Okay, Nick, and then Sarah again.
Richard's covered, that's my point. So
Thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's also been giant hogweed identified down by Asda. So, I mean, are we going to have a question where do we draw the line? Because some people would argue that glyphosate is the best treatment for giant hogweed as well. It's already been marked in orange. I don't know who by, but Richard, you probably do.
You can pull hogweed while you're with gloves on and stuff and get rid of it that way.
Because that's basically what I was going to say.
It's not like knotweed is, it will just go everywhere.
Okay, I looked into what we've done on this in the past. I mean, I was at the meeting in July 2016 when the previous council agreed to abolish the general use of glyphosates because it was just being sprayed in the street. I mean, this is when we've had to see how weeds coming up in the streets, because beforehand it was being treated with Roundup. That's obviously ended now, and in fact, Mendip in September 2019 adopted the same policy. Somerset, I've looked at what they're doing about it. They have a machine, or they use a machine called a Weed It, which is environmentally friendly, non-residual weed killer that leaves no residue after 24 hours. So presumably some sort of machinery like that is what they're intending to use. We think that Mendip are dealing with this issue on their land, possibly on the Saxon Vale site. So we want to make an approach to them to see if they're doing it at the moment, how they're tackling it, and possibly because I raised the issue. Well, we've got two banks of the river. I think that it's on one side at the moment. I'm not sure if it's on the other side, but the bit that we've got, we're responsible for, and we're really legally responsible for it if we don't deal with it. So we have to make a decision on dealing with this, and it's right that we make a decision for a time-limited, site-by-site decision for this, rather than the blanket exception to the resolution we passed in 2016. Rachel.
Just for the benefit of the people who are watching at home who can't see the Q&A, Andy Jones wanted to know that if this is approved, is it going to be a time-limited approval, and what will a review process be if it's needed in subsequent years?
Please, yeah.
Andy, Chris and I are proposing that this is a one-off. If it comes back, then obviously we'll need to come back to this committee to ask for another one-off. But I don't see it in any way as a sort of a blanket okay. Technology moves on and skills, so it would be wrong just to assume that we use a glyphosate on this into the future when there might be more options available. Evaluating it, the rangers regularly, very regularly, walk all of our riverbank in particular, and they would keep their eye on it. It's them that raised it with Chris and I earlier. So that's how the evaluation will go on. So they'll monitor it continually, certainly weekly, for example.
Thank you. Is there anybody else got any questions about this before we go to the recommendation? Yeah, go on.
So, I'm picking up your point, Mark. What I'd like to do, just to sort of make sure that we have explored. Chris might have done this, and as I say, I'm flagging it a bit tonight because he's the expert on this. But I'd like him to go to Somerset County Council and look at that
Weed It machine.
Weed It machine that you're talking about, just to make sure that we aren't missing a trick. And secondly, I think because we know Mendip have got a really big job to do on eradicating this at Saxon Vale, I'll ask him as well, if it's okay, to just explore whether we can add this to the contract. It might be feasible, it might not.
Okay, so Laura, can we have the recommendation, please? So there's four parts to this. I approve the use of herbicides containing glyphosate for the management and chemical control of Japanese knotweed identified on council land in the future, including the knotweed already found on the riverbanks at Welshmill and Henley Way. Record that this use is an exception to the council's continuing policy of not using products containing glyphosate on FTC land. Delegate responsibility to the environment manager and the lead ranger to oversee contracts with companies to manage the knotweed, and delegate responsibility to the environment manager and lead ranger to ensure that safe working practices are adopted at all times when managing knotweed. So that's, hopefully that'll be the signs, and Rachel's team will have to make people aware that that is happening. I'm happy to propose this. Is there a seconder? Oh, sorry.
First part, number one, it's not making it time limited, is it?
I'm really pleased. I was in two minds, Sheila, whether to raise this.
Yeah.
And I'm very minded of the fact that I can't make propose amendments, but I would prefer, considering that we don't know what's going to happen in future, is every time we identify some knotweed, we go through this process to double check that there aren't alternatives.
Yes.
So I wonder if Sheila might like to make an amendment to the recommendation.
So it's basically cut out the bit about in the future, just specifically Welshmill and Henley Way, isn't it?
Yeah, cut out the bit about in the future, to say in this case or
Yeah.
at the moment or.
So chemical control of Japanese knotwood found on the riverbanks at Welshmill and Henley Way.
The crucial point being once only on those two places.
So have we got a form of words for that? Approve the use of herbicides containing glyphosate for the management and chemical control of Japanese knotweed identified on the riverbanks at Welshmill.
On the council land at Welsh.
On the
Identified on the council land at this time, including knotweed already found on the riverbanks of Welshmill and Henley Way.
Well, hang on though, because it is specifically, it's not including, it's specifically not really Welshmill and Henley Way.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so
can I read something out that might get us there?
thank you.
Approve the use of herbicides containing glyphosate for the management of chemical control of Japanese knotweed identified on the riverbanks at Welshmill and Henley Way. And then the next one says this is an exceptional, so that should cover it.
Yeah. So I need a proposer for that amendment, which is Nick. Sheila will second that amendment. Can we have a vote on the amendment?
Anita, have you got your hand up? I can't do a bit. Yes, Anita. Or are you just waving no? I'll assume that Anita, I think, just be on the safe side, I'll make that as by majority.
Okay.
Is that right?
That's fine. Therefore, we now need to vote on the amended recommendation. And I'm happy to propose the amended recommend.
For all four.
I think yes, is there any objections to any of the other three? So it's quite safe to take them all as one. Okay, I'll propose that. Nick will second it. And in the room, you're abstaining. Sarah's abstaining.
So that is majority.
Thank you. Right, the next one. It's back to Chris again in lieu, but Paul will be in lieu. What's happening recently in the parks and green spaces?
Funny you should ask that, Mark. As Chris always does at this point on the agenda, he lists the stuff that's recently been completed, stuff that's ongoing and stuff that's coming soon. I propose, unless anyone wants me to answer any questions on this, I won't read them out, but happy to answer any questions. The one actually saying that, the one thing I would draw your attention to is the second spate of vandalism we've had on the wall at alongside the river at Welshmill Park, which is very frustrating, very time consuming for the rangers to make it safe, and then very time consuming for Chris to find the waller, who as a trade are in very high demand at the moment. So we hope we can get that fixed as soon as possible, but quite disheartening, I would say. Any questions on any of those? Nick's got his hand up.
Go on, Nick.
Yeah, I don't know if you can answer this, Paul, because you're speaking on Chris's behalf, but the Chapman's Close work, do you know what that's about? I mean, there's a green space there with a netball or basketball court. I was interested because I've been approached by some local residents who I've passed on to Sheila actually in the past, who's very keen to get involved in working in that area. They're from the older side of the more mature side of the backside of the estate in terms of population. But it would be really useful thing for them to get joined.
I think Rachel knows about that.
Yeah, actually, there's some information just about to go up and out into all of the local residents, inviting them to come and talk to Helen. I think she's going to be up there on July the 14th, but it will also leave her the information that's going out, I'm sure, will also give her details for other ways to feed in if they can't make that engagement. So hopefully that will catch them, but we'll email you a copy of that so that you can pass it on.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question about green spaces? No? Thank you. Moving on. So Sarah's going to talk to us about the earmarked reserves.
There is a question from Andy.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, of course. Sorry.
This Rachel, does that ring any bells?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. Andy is asking, there was a recent poll on where we want to see Blossom in Froome. Any updates? We did give a little update with the results of that, and the hope is that we'll be bringing something here to this committee probably next time with a view to planting blossom circles in well, ostensibly the end of October. The hope is that we'll be able to combine something with Apple Day and do a really excellent commemorative, for want of a better word. I really need to think of a word that I really want to put in that space. But I think a number of sites have been identified for blossom trees, and hopefully that will be coming to us in the autumn.
Good. Sarah, and the earmarked reserves.
Laura, do you have the first slide, please? So I was asked to produce a report on the earmarked reserves, and I sent out the list of them all in detail. You'll see there are currently 30. So the overview is we have total reserves of 1.8 million, and that is 1,066,000 in general reserves for expenditure related to our budget, including the precept. And then we have a separate section of reserves of 792,000, which are our earmarked reserves. 344,000 of that is the remaining funds from the sale of Saxonvale, and 448,000 are for the 29 other projects that have a clear earmarked reserve projects. Next slide, please, Laura. So I was asked to try and explain, for those of you who need it, how the balance sheet looks when it repeats the 1.8 million. It talks about the accounts that we're holding the 1.8 million in, which is across 7 bank accounts. But it also says that we have 2 separate sets of reserves totaling 1.8 million. So I don't know that I've articulated that as well as the pie chart looks, but if you understand what we're saying, we've got 1.8 million in 7 bank accounts, and we've got 1.8 million in reserves. And it's how we perceive the reserves. So where we hold the money has got nothing to do with where it's allocated. If we don't hold all the earmarked reserves in 3 separate accounts. So next slide, please, Laura. I have been asked about the Saxonvale profit, if you like. What happened to the money that we received from the sale of Saxonvale? So not for the first time, I have listed it here. The biggest payment, as you'll see, went to Homes England, which was on agreement when we first purchased the land, that any profit made on it, 50%, would go straight back to them. We also agreed to pay Somerset Skills and Learning a £50,000 relocation fee if we needed them to move from the land, and there was also stamp duty and legal fees. From the remaining funds, we have used some for Marketplace phases 2 and 3, and we have put some into new project exploration, such as the Western Warehouse and potential relocation of the Rangers Yard at some point. So the balance of the funds of 337 went to the existing Saxonvale EMR, which had about 6,000 already left in it. Hence 344 in the Saxonvale EMR. That's capital expenditure, which can only be spent on capital projects. Next slide, please, Laura. So the remaining 448,000 in earmark reserves sits across broadly 6 projects. That is 119k for environment and open spaces, 70,000 for the town hall maintenance, marketing and business software development. And next slide, please, Laura. 61,000 set aside for economic regeneration projects such as the CCTV, the marketplace, tourism, business support and new projects research. 65,000 is set aside for community development, which is grants, youth and violence reduction work and community groups training. We've also set aside some funds for sustainability for the ecological emergency declaration, which I understand is being planned. And 66,000 is kept aside for agreements, S106 agreements made with developers for civic purposes such as elections. We make savings every year towards elections. And the Lotto fund. The Lotto have prepaid us, if you like, for the next 18 months. So we need to hold the funds in a distinctly separate area and just spend it on the Green and Healthy Futures project. So that is it in short on our EMRs. Are there any questions? Great. I'll move on to John. Sorry, John Clark has said that he'd like to ask an item, question about this item.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the Section 106 funding. So, for example, there's £23,000 for the Foundry Barton 106. I just wondered, we had these Section 106 monies, but I just wanted to ask who makes decisions about where and how they are spent. Some time ago, I asked about this and was told there was a group, but I never got to find out who this group was. So Foundry Barton, for example, which I think is in my, maybe in my market ward, you know, it's quite a substantial amount of money that's got earmarked for that area. I just wondered whether any plans have been made to use those funds and consult with residents in the area as to how those monies can be used. Because my understanding is we don't use them within a certain period of time, we actually lose them. But I may be wrong in that respect. So yeah, my question is, has there been any efforts to look at how those, to consult with residents about how those 106 monies for Foundry Barton can be used? And any other use of 106 monies, is there a group that looks at how they're spent so we use them effectively, or the town council use them on behalf of residents effectively, and engage with residents where they can around those monies? Thank you.
I'll hand over to Paul, but we're missing Jill Phone tonight, who would, I'm sure, be contributing to the conversation. Jill, where are you?
Well, I can answer that. I met Jill Phone, has a group of residents there, and Chris and I are meeting with them. They're aware of the amount of money, and they have projects lined up for the area, and we will be working out how best to chip into that 23,000.
John, did you hear that okay?
Did I hear it? Yeah, that's good news. I don't know who was speaking though.
It was Mark.
Oh, okay, Mark. That's good to hear. Thanks, Mark. Can you answer the general question about 106 monies, please?
Yeah, yes, I'll take that one, John. Just before I do, this was the Foundry Barton Section 106 budget was allocated to us because Mendip were holding it. We've spent a fair portion of that on establishing the open space at Foundry Barton, and this is the remainder of it that Mark was referring to. He's talking with some of the residents and Chris about how to sort of use the rest of it. Section 106 generally, when they come to us, which isn't always, because you're right, some Section 106s are held by Mendip, and if there is a time limit on them, which I think there usually is, then they have to give them back if it's not spent. When the money comes to us, we will always ensure that it's spent in good time. We will never give it back.
Good.
Ever.
I'd like to. Thanks, Paul.
Just, just to make sure that we have a clear understanding of the budget, I think we need to those two small S106s left under walkers and welcome and signage are all now spoken for with the finger signpost work exchange.
Can I just ask a supplementary question, Paul? So if we wanted to identify some funding for a particular issue in Frome, how could we get Mendit to transfer that money to us? Who makes that decision about 106 monies being? So if we wanted to enhance green spaces, for example, and there's a number of green spaces which have now been referred to as greens, for example. So if we wanted to actually sort of enhance those spaces and there's some 106 monies, how does that process work? Because I spoke some time ago to the woman at Mendip and she seemed to think that we just have to apply. But is that true?
Section 106s are established as part of the planning condition when permission for a new development is given, and what the developer does at a certain point in the development, he hands over or she hands over that budget to Mendip, and they hold it for specific reasons that were related to that Section 106. So, for example, the Foundry Barton one was to establish and manage an open space in Foundry Barton. So that was very specific and couldn't be applied anywhere else in the town, for example. Occasionally, planning conditions which result in a Section 106 budget are able to be used on other open spaces, for example. I mean, they're usually made for building roads and schools and stuff, but there are sometimes these Section 106 agreements that are ambiguous enough to be able to, for example, wording like to enhance open spaces in the vicinity of the development is one common one that the Mendip planners use. And I think that's where you're referring to, where there's a by design ambiguity to enable it to be spread out. I don't think any of those are around anymore at the moment, but if we found out about them, we would ensure that we consult the community on how that might be spent. It's a sort of a bit of a grey area about what the actual process is, but if we found out about them, and we normally do quite a long way in advance, we would make sure that the community is involved in the vicinity of that development, and if there are those open spaces to improve.
Thank you, Paul.
Nick, then Rich.
Thanks. Thank you, Sarah, for the information. Just one question, if you could help. Sort of halfway through the pandemic year, there was real concern that the income that we normally get from the police.
We can't hear anything, Nick. Can you speak up a little bit, please? Thank you.
Sorry, I'll start again. Can you hear me now, John? Fantastic, thanks. Halfway through the pandemic year, we had some news or some information that might be a drop off in the contributions from the precept because of the number of people who potentially lose their jobs and therefore would fall off the council tax register. Has that manifested itself as a problem as yet, or is it too early to tell?
It didn't manifest last year. And we did think it might be a bit too early. The growth in numbers wasn't as high as we might have expected. So we're waiting to see what this year's tax base will be, and we should know those figures in November or December.
Okay, thanks very much.
Can I add something to that? Sarah, correct me if this is wrong. What we do with the precept demand, it's the amount of money that is the precept, and Mendip will give us that money, and then they will calculate the bandy impact and the impact of council tax. So we don't actually ask for £85 for bandy people in Frome. We ask for the actual amount of money, and we get that. There's no doubt about that. The slight error, so slight margin is around the amount taxpayers would pay themselves as individuals contributing to it. Is that right?
Okay.
Yes, and I believe Mendip also make a calculation each year as to collectibles or what might not be collectible, and they probably made a slightly larger calculation last year for uncollectibles.
Rich?
Hopefully we're on there. Just would like to come back to John's point about Section 106 money. I've chased this up several times over the years. It's basically, in my opinion, down to Mendip District Planning Authority to put strict Section 106 agreements in when developments are developed. They are specific as has just been explained. But I do think that sometimes Mendip allow developers to get away with virtually anything. And the amount of money that has been handed over in Section 106 has been paltry, in my opinion, for some developments recently. So looking forward, as a district councillor, John, can you ensure that Saxon Vale and all these other sites that might be coming up for development, that there's some blooming stonking good amounts of Section 106 that aren't tied down too specifically to just being used in one way? And that way you can find some money for green spaces. It's quite difficult to do that, but I think unless Mendip as a planning authority insist on decent amounts of money, we're always going to be in this situation. Thanks.
Can I just come back on that, John Clark?
No.
Quickly.
You can, John.
I will make every effort I can, because they're absolutely right. We need to push them to give 106 monies where we really need to and not let developers get away with it. So I will do my best. Thanks.
Thank you. Right. Any more on that? This isn't a recommendation, is it just for information, this one?
Just for information, yeah.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So the next one will be, what's that? Okay, so I take it you're also going to tell us about the financial position.
Yep, Hannah has kindly written the report this month, and we're reporting on the first 2 months of the year, so there's very little to say other than the figures are what you see, and there's nothing of concern to note. So unless there are any questions, I'll go straight to recommendations.
Does anybody have a question about our financial position? No, in that case, Laura, I understand there's a recommendation that we have to look at. There we are. So we need to approve the income and expenditure sheet, approve the payments made over £500, and approve the balance sheet, including our reserves at 31st of May this year. So would someone like to propose that we accept these recommendations? Nick would like to propose that. Rich will second it.
That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see Andy Rintmore. Andy Rintmore, are you putting your hand up to approve, to support the proposal? Yes, he has.
Yeah, there it is.
Thank you very much. That's unanimous.
A big hand for Andy Rintmore. Thank you very much. And what do we have next? We have health and safety update. Again, this would normally be Chris, but I take it that Paul will be giving this.
Number 10 is the town hall update.
Sorry, is that you? I scrolled down too far in my haste. No, that's what's happening at the town hall.
Well,
Funny you should ask that.
Really hoped to be saying we've had the door open for a whole week and it's been marvellous, but obviously we have been gazumped again by the health situation. So really not too much else to report. We have Active and in Touch still haven't returned. We are trying to look at a creative way to get them back in, whilst also allowing Y to move to a different space so that we can reclaim the antechamber. So there are a few negotiations going on there, and that is all in process. I hope to have something to report a bit more concrete next time. Cleaning wise, track and trace wise, all things remain as they were last time that I reported. We are still in the halfway house, so that is all good. Yes, we remain to be monitoring the staff use of the building, so that's all good. In terms of the budget and the income, that's looking a little bit better than last time we reported. We are now, after 2 months of the year, down to £17,000 deficit, and we are getting bookings all of the time. Some of our more regular bookings have come back as anticipated, like the probation service. So that's good to have them back in, and we are expecting a raft of other people to come online come what's the next date that we're looking at? 19th of July. So that all seems to be in process. So I would say that I am quietly optimistic that we're going to reduce that deficit and make it plus. Fabric of the building, that's the most important thing that I needed to just let everybody know here tonight. We had reported that the work on the roof was due to start last week. Sadly, our contractors have pulled out. So rather than start the whole process again, we've gone to contractor number 2, who was offering a very similar offer, but for a slightly higher price, and they're able to start in September. So we've booked them in, and I really hope we're able to get that work done before the rains come, the bad rains come. So in conclusion, really, we are mildly positive, but fingers crossed for the rain.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Rachel about the town hall? I have to be here very often on a Saturday morning, and it's quite encouraging the number of weddings that Nikki is forcing through the door. It's a real sausage machine.
Mark, could I just want to mention one other thing? I think it would not go amiss with me to not mention Sarah and Sean's mammoth effort to get all of this stuff working. That's been the biggest, the biggest amount of work that's been done in the town hall.
Yeah, well done. Take our thanks for that, and give them to Sean as well. Thank you very much. Where are we? Has anybody got a hand up on the screen? Any questions? There's something in the chat. Okay, now, is it now health and safety?
It is.
Go on then.
It's the moment you've all been waiting for. The report is there from Chris. I don't want to highlight anything other than what I've already said earlier about the path along Welsh Mill and the wall there. Nothing else I want to highlight on the report, Mark.
Okay. Any questions on health and safety? In that case, we'll come to our final item and ask Laura to tell us about staff matters.
So it's all really just staff continuing to attend as much training and upping the skill level and things like that. So that's really positive. I suppose the other things to note since that report came out is that we were going to have a couple of job vacancies come online. So we're currently advertising for a resilience communications officer. The business apprentice has now gone live on the SSNL website, and I'll repeat the details on our website tomorrow, as well as a customer services advisor as well. So share far and wide, please.
Thank you very much, Laura. Any questions for Laura about our staff?
It's an online software program that has a couple of hundred short courses, which are really useful, short but useful, that anyone, any of our staff can do.
They're mainly on health and safety issues, or broader than that?
They're much broader than that, soft skills as well as technical skills and health and safety issues. Can I just add that very sadly, well, semi-sadly, Tricia Muggeridge, who's been with us for 10 years, has decided to take flexible retirement. So we're not losing her completely. She will be giving up her half-time reception post at the end of August, but she's moving over to Discover Froome to help Rachel manage the coordinate the volunteers at Discover Froome. Is that right?
Yes, both of our volunteer coordinators have Pamela and Susan, who have done an amazing job of setting everything up and in motion, have decided that they'd like to step down. They're going to remain volunteers but no longer do the coordination. So that is quite a neat segue using Tricia's amazing customer service
Needless to say, we
skills
are
and all the knowledge.
delighted to keep
I know.
Tricia on board, and she's even offered to come back and help train the next receptionist if we need it during September. So actually it's a great opportunity for somebody to come and join the town hall team on a half-time or 3-day-a-week basis.
Okay, thank you very much. Rich.
Yeah, quick comment. I think it's great that all our staff are willing to take training opportunities. I think it's great that we can offer it, and I think it's great that, you know, there's such a variety of courses and everybody's doing different things. Everybody's keen, enthusiastic, and that must be down to the management of those people. So well done, you senior manager people. You know, it's great that seriously, there are lots of organisations out there that don't offer training to their staff unless they really have to. So it's great that we get this. Well done.
Very good. Any more? Is there any other business? Not that we ever do that, but in which case we can bring this meeting to an end. The next one will be 7 o'clock here on the 8th of September. Thank you very much for everybody who's attended, both physically and virtually, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.